My name is Bernard Turner. I was born in Chicago 64 years ago. And I grew up on the south side in the Chatham neighborhood, but I started out in this neighborhood. I am currently working as a sales rep for an educational publishing company called Zaner Bloser, and it's part of the Highlights for Children company. You've probably heard of the magazine Highlights for Children. Mm-hmm. And I sell books to schools. But I also have written and published 7 books, mostly about Chicago history and neighborhoods. I'm very interested in Chicago neighborhoods and Chicago history. I'm also a volunteer docent at the Chicago History Museum. I give tours, walking tours, L tours, and I do activities in the museum, and I've been doing that for 12 years. I am on the board of the Camp Douglas Restoration Foundation, and I'm currently working on the educational curriculum component of the Great Migration Centennial, which is going to take place in 2016.
Which public housing facility did you live?
We lived in Cabrini-Green on the north side.
Why did your family decide to move into public housing?
I think that my family was in some sort of a transition. My father originally owned a gas station, and his gas station was in this neighborhood in the 1950s, and he did pretty well. But, and then later on we moved to Chatham. We lived in Chatham, and throughout the time we were there, my father had lost the gas station and had a variety of different kinds of jobs and had some issues with employment and money, and I guess you could say he kind of tripped and fell, and we ended up in Cabrini-Green for a couple of years.
Can you explain to us what your community was like, I guess in both places?
Wow, the opposites, what opposites those two were. You can think of Chatham as being middle class, being very stable, being very beautiful. When we first got there, it was mostly, it was at the end of turning black, so to speak. When we first got there, it was kind of diverse, but when we, later on, it was all black. But it was still very stable, very beautiful, very well kept up, very open. And you can contrast that with Cabrini-Green being what we used to call stone monsters, being very closed, very ghetto, very oppressive, kind of unfriendly, and very closed off from, the rest of the world. So it was a real transition for me, especially.
How has that area changed since you've lived there, as far as you know?
Oh, wow. It's done 180-degree change. Most of those buildings have been torn down. In fact, all of the Cabrini-Green high-rise projects have been torn down. I believe the goal was to do what is called mixed income housing in that area. I don't know, they've put up a lot of housing in that area. I don't know if it's mixed income. I don't see a lot of the same kind of people there now who lived there when I was in high school. So it seems to have gentrified to the nth degree, as opposed to making a transition from being a low-class ghetto-type neighborhood to becoming a middle-class or mixed-income neighborhood. So I think it's just gone from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. And you can see that in other neighborhoods as well, Bronzeville being a good example of that.
So you talked about you talked about it being kind of a difficult transition for you living there. Do you have any memories or like specific descriptions that you'd like to share with us?
Sure. I lived there in my last 2 years of high school, which meant that for me, I would leave that apartment and I would go to the L, what is now the Red Line, and I would take the Red Line to Bryn Mawr, and my high school was Senn High School. So I would just leave there, get on the L, go to Edgewater, which is the community that's in, come back home, go back into the apartment, and I wouldn't have any interaction with any people. It was just go home, go to school, come back, and then later on at one point I had a job, which I had a job at a grocery store over on State Street called Potash Brothers. Believe it or not, it is still there. And that's where I worked when I was in high school. And I would go to my little job, I would go home, I would go to school, and I would come home, and I would stay inside. There wasn't any, going out and hanging out or any of that kind of stuff. It was just, I didn't feel comfortable, let's put it that way.
Were there things around that you saw that like specifically made you uncomfortable and made you make that decision to not kind of interact with anyone else?
Well, I mean, you could tell that there were gangs and drugs, and you could tell that. I didn't really ever experience any what I would call dangerous situations, mainly because I kept to myself. I think my brothers might have, though, because they were younger than me, and they might have experienced some dangerous things, but I didn't really at all. I don't remember anything at that. I don't remember anything. Let's put it that way. But it was kind of a scary neighborhood to me.
So has living there and the things that you have seen, or even the things that you know of that you haven't seen, have those things impacted your life in any way now or then?
I don't really think so. I think that my my education was very sound. I believe that my family structure was very positive and supportive. And I was so into school and so into band. I was a band guy. That I just really, kept on track. And never wavered from it. I always wanted to go to college. It was a foregone conclusion that I would go to college. And it didn't affect me, I don't think. I think it made me think about different people, different walks of life, and how lucky I was to be, who I was, and, had a good family and, good upbringing and so forth. So it may help me to appreciate what I had.
Can you talk about some of the positive and negative aspects of public housing?
I can't really think of any positive aspects of it other than people have a place to live. I mean, when you think about the conditions, they weren't very nice. When I think about the inside of the apartment, I remember cinder block walls that were painted, so it didn't look bad, but it was still cinder block walls. It wasn't plaster, plaster walls or whatever. I remember that we lived on the 18th floor, and on our floor and every other floor there had to be at least 10 apartments. So when you think of a building that has 18 floors with 10 apartments on each floor, how many people are in that one building? That's a lot of people to be in one building. So it was very crowded and very smelly. I used to walk up and down the steps a lot because I didn't want to take the elevator. Why? The elevator elevator was a little smelly. The stairway was smelly too, for that matter, but I still would rather take the stairway than take the elevator. My mom did. So yeah, I can't really think of anything good about it other than this particular building on the 18th floor was on Oak Street. Think about what else is on Oak Street. If you're in that area, you look at beautiful scenery in Chicago. So it was in an ideal place. The other good thing about it is you could go from there to the beach, Oak Street Beach. You could get there pretty quick, and it was beautiful. So really, I can't think of anything else other than the location and that sort of thing.
Do you feel like if you would have gone to...
Had gardens and things like that, and so that was only right across the street from us. So kids were out playing. The school was right across the street, and cars could drive through there, but kids were still out playing. But each one of those floors had a fence. So you could go out to the fence and call the kid, come on in, it's time for you to come to dinner or whatever. So yeah, it was very difficult. Imagine the people on the upper floors. It's very difficult. But I think there was a lot of, like I said, I didn't really see a lot of crime, and I never saw guns, I never saw any drugs. But at the same time, I was pretty naive, coming from the South Side and getting on the L to go up to Senn High School. I was pretty naive. I wasn't looking for anything like that. So.
Do you think that going to that high school specifically, and also living in public housing for those couple transition years, has contributed to the person that you are today?
Well, I have some good stories to tell, like the neighbors with the chickens. And I used to also play the baritone horn, and I used to practice the baritone horn every afternoon. And I would especially like to go next to those people who had those chickens and play that baritone horn. So yeah, I have some good stories. I really loved when we used to go play baseball behind the school. That was a wonderful thing. Not that I didn't do that on the South Side, but yeah, it was an enriching situation. It wasn't the most pleasant living circumstances, but it was interesting.
How were if you don't mind me asking, how were the rooms set up? Was it like your apartment? Was it just how many bedrooms?
I think there were 2 bedrooms, maybe 2 bedrooms. The kitchen kind of, there was a kitchen, and it kind of joined in the kitchen, dining area, living room. There weren't separate rooms, but it was all kind of together. And then there were 2 bedrooms, I think 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms, I don't remember. But it was like a box, you think of a box, and here's the kitchen, here's the dining area, here's the living area, and then you go down this hall, and there's these 2 bedrooms, and in the middle there's a bathroom. But it was, think of it as a box, all that. And it was, we had a really good view. We had a really good view.
Yeah. What was your address and the apartment number?
502 West Oak Street, apartment 1802.